Yes, this is quite a bit of a challenge this morning because I don't want to step on toes, but it's a topic that we do need to discuss. So you're at a potluck and you see the cheese there, lots of cheese. Pass the cheese. Really? Or maybe not. You know, as we're going on from time to time, we always have to remember that our whole existence is about choice. Our whole existence is about freedom of choice. That's one thing that our Supreme God has given us, the freedom to choose. That means we have the privilege or obligation to make our own choice. What are we going to believe? Who are we going to believe? That choice comes into every aspect of our being. We're choosing every moment of every day. Everything we do is about choice. So, really, what does choice have to do with cheese? Well, we live in this Western hemisphere, and most of us have come in contact with cheese. A few maybe think, I can leave it or take it or leave it, but others, and I want to say, in my opinion, I'd estimate the majority are cheese lovers. Do we have any cheese lovers out there? You don't have to answer. Okay. So we're going to take a little look. I know it's almost lunchtime. We're probably hungry, and I'm going to show you a few little pictures that might make you salivate a bit. So here we go. Cheese again. Blocks, round, all kind of cheese. Cheese pizza. I know that is a favorite. Macaroni and cheese, especially the Southern style of macaroni and cheese, laden with fat, and it's delicious. Okay, we've got to admit, it is delicious. Pasta with cheese. Salad. Even our salad today, we have to sprinkle cheese on it. Is that by accident? Anyways. But let's not forget the children's favorite, grilled cheese. They even love to make it themselves, right? Grilled cheese. So when I was doing this little research on cheese, I came across a very interesting one. It's named Pecorino cheese or Casu Marzu. And if you're looking and wondering what that is there, it is maggots. It's a little place in Italy where this cheese is very popular. I think it originated there, Sardinia, Italy, up on the map. And they actually allow the flies to lay their eggs in the cheese. The maggots hatch, they start to digest the cheese into a liquefied mush. Then they take that mush, spread it onto a cracker. The maggots are still alive, they're jumping. So they're known to hold a card just below their nose and open their mouth, and in goes a cracker with the maggots jumping all over the place. So I hope nobody here loves cheese that much that they would go to that method, to go to that level. I just had to add that. I just said that is totally amazing. So when we have a craving, when we have an addiction to something, we will do anything. So just how is cheese made, basically? So you get your milk from the dairy farms, and I could go into a whole thing about dairy farms. And just to take a moment just to say something, that there's a lot of cruelty. We think the cows are just there for extracting the milk. But in the dairy farm, the average cow is only kept alive for 4 years, when in regular nature, they're alive for 20 years. What they do, they artificially inseminate them every single year, so they have a calf every year. So they're always in this state of pregnancy. When the calf is born, they literally rip that little calf away from the mother, and there's crying between the mother and the calf. I was just so heartbroken when I read that. Anyway, so getting on to the rest of it. So you have your vat full of milk here. They add bacteria. And now I thought this bacteria was very interesting as well. Look at this one, Brevibacteria. This is one they use. You know, when someone doesn't wash their feet for like a few days, it gets kind of smelly, stinky, in fact. Well, that bacteria that causes the decomposition between the toes is actually Brevibacteria. Now, Brevibacteria is actually added to the milk. Can you believe that? There's another one called Staphylococcus epidermidis. This bacteria is responsible for the body odor or the odor under your armpits, when it gets foul. That is also used in making cheese. Butyric acid, that's put into Parmesan cheese, and sometimes Parmesan cheese has that faint odor of vomit. Well, that butyric acid is the bacteria that's responsible for that. So again, nothing is pure when it comes to making cheese. Also, what is added is rennet, and rennet can be from many sources. It usually comes from the fourth stomach of the bovine calf, because they have four stomachs. Or right today, it's more genetically engineered. Some of it comes from pork as well, from pigs. So again, not a good product. I'm just showing you some of the pictures as it's being processed. The bacteria is added for fermentation, and the rennet is added for it to coagulate. So here we go. They drain the liquid, and you end up with a concentrated protein and fat. Most of the sugar has fermented. It ferments into lactic acid. And you're left with a highly concentrated substance. And then on top of that, salt, tons of salt is added to prevent too much fermentation. The other things that are added to it as well, like beta carotene from the milk, it gives it the orange color. And you end up with the end product of cheese, as you see here. High protein, very high fat, like 70% fat, saturated fat, high cholesterol, and very high in sodium. So again, it's highly, highly processed. And when you think of it, the process starts from the grass stage where the cow eats the grass, and it continues until we get into the stage of cheese. So it's one of the most highly processed foods that you'll find in the supermarket. So you know that the human race is the only species on Earth that consumes another mammal's milk for sustenance. So in nature, milk was meant to be consumed only by the offspring of the mother who is producing it. There's a protein in milk called casein, which is a protein that is known to have opiate-like effects. And why is this done? It's to give the baby the craving for the mother's milk so they could grow. So it's actually for addiction. And this protein is in our milk and in our cheese, especially at a concentrated level. And just going forward, we just have to pay attention. Now, Ellen G. White, I went back and looked and said a few things that she said about cheese. She stressed that cheese should never be introduced into the stomach. Are we guilty? The effects of cheese, she said, is deleterious. Also, when she was comparing cheese with butter at the time, she said cheese is still more objectionable. It is wholly unfit for food. So if she is telling us this, and we know that she's inspired by our Savior, our Creator who made our body, I think we should start to listen. Whether we like it or not, just listen, just obey. So you hear on mainstream media all the time, they talk about cheese, they talk about dairy, and they're always pushing dairy, right? So I saw this interview on WXYZ TV in Detroit, Channel 7. They interviewed Dr. Nandi, and he actually said, and I was surprised, eating cheese every day may actually be good for you. I said, okay, let's hear him out. And he said at the end, cheese lovers have a lower risk of stroke and heart disease. I was blown away. I could not believe he was saying that, because as we go on, we'll see further. And you grow up all your life hearing, drink your milk, it's good for your bones. It's good for osteoporosis in older women, especially. That theory has been debunked. So again, even though he said, you have to eat it every day, he did, say that if you have a heart disease or stroke risk, then eat less cheese. I say get rid of it altogether. So we're going to look at a few other experts, what they had to say about cheese. And this is taken from the book, A Good Cook, 10 Talents. It's a very popular book, and they've just reprinted it. And Dr. Frank Hurd and Rosalie Hurd, they said there is a conditional evidence linking the use of animal products, meat, eggs, cream, butter, and cheese, fish and fowl, with various levels of cholesterol and saturated fat to the increased risk of numerous human diseases such as cancer, coronary artery disease, atherosclerosis, diabetes, arthritis, obesity. Do we as Seventh-day Adventists have any of these conditions? This was written back in 1968. So we've either been willfully ignorant or just, I guess, not wanting to follow or not knowing. So I ran into Dr. Neil Bernard. He is actually an associate professor of medicine at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. He's a founder and president of Bernard Medical Center. What do they do there? They promote healthful vegan diets for disease and prevention. And he founded this committee called Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And that's what they do at that place. And many other physicians, at that time of the writing of the book, there were about 10,000 physician members, and now it's gone up. I'm sure it's about 15 or 20,000 by now. He's written about 18 books, and he's not a Seventh-day Adventist. He does not have our health message. This book is called The Cheese Trap. I purchased this myself, and I was addicted. It was so much good information there. He said, loaded cheese is loaded with calories, high in sodium, packing more cholesterol than steak, and sprinkled with hormones. If cheese were any worse, it would be Vaseline. Vaseline. He is saying this, and they've done so much research. Some foods are fattening, others are addictive. Cheese is both fattening and addictive. Do we need to hear any more, really? I could almost end it here. Dr. Agatha Thrash, she should be a household name for Adventists because she's written so much about health. And in her cookbook called Eat for Strength, which is very important, she said that she talked about fats on a more general principle that any fats pose a health threat, basically. And it increases your risk of cancer. Have you seen a rise in cancer? She said, nutritional principle is that concentrated foods, which cheese is one of the most concentrated, must be used sparingly. And that also applies to all fats. So sometimes we as vegetarians, we think, okay, I've given up meat, but guess what? We increase the cheese like nobody's business. Cheese consumption in the US. And when I say the US, it's Canada as well. It's probably all around the world because cheese consumption has gone up around the world, but this is a US study. Back in the 1900s, they started to monitor track what Americans were eating. And at that time, it was 3.8 pounds of cheese per year per person. Now, as you see the steady climb, and I'll show you why it went so steadily. In 2017, at the time, they were now eating 37 pounds of cheese per person per year. That's a lot of cheese. Why are we gaining weight? So you just wonder, why did it increase so much? And sad to say, there is a political side. Is there a political side of cheese? And I'd have to say yes. Governments have been recruited by the dairy industry to promote their products. In the US, by working with the food chains to make sure cheese is an emphasized product. Now, this I found just alarming. Back in December 20,000, they had a cheese forum between the government and the dairy farmers. And this was called Cheese Lovers and Triggering the Crave. How did they do that? Well, they divided cheese lovers into two groups, the cravers and the enhancers. Which one were they going to focus on, or were they going to focus on both? Well, as they were doing their research, they realized that the enhancers were just those people who would maybe put a little bit of Parmesan cheese on something, or a little bit of cheese on their salad, not too much. But they found the heaviest ones were those who were, the cravers were the ones that were heavily consuming cheese already. They were already the big consumers. So they targeted them. They literally targeted these cravers. How can we make them eat more cheese? Okay, so they didn't care about the enhancers. They cared about the cravers. So the US government went to work. This will shock you. They made a contract with Wendy's and they had a promotion called, I don't know if anybody was back in the day, I think it was in 2000, when Wendy's came up with Cheddar Lovers Bacon Cheeseburger. Of course, we don't eat bacon, but I'm sure we've heard the advertisements, right? Well, during this promotional period, they actually sold 2.25 million pounds of cheese. What does it translate into our bodies? That's 380 tons of fat and 1.2 tons of pure cholesterol. So when they were so happy, they said, oh, this is wonderful, more money in our pockets. So they made further contracts with Subways, Pizza Hut, Burger King, Taco Bell, and I'm sure there were others. So these chains now started to promote special sandwiches that had cheese. And when you went to Subway, they always had, do you want cheese? Do you want cheese on your sandwich? Pizza Hut, the same thing. They'd actually use a pound of cheese in their pizzas, in an individual pizza. And Taco Bell and Burger King, when you drive up, do you want a quesadilla? Like those little things are actually deliberate. So it's not by surprise that the consumption has gone up. But what are some of the health effects because of increased cheese consumption? They did some studies as well, this group of physicians, and they actually went to a fertility clinic, and they found out that, I'm going to do the one on the right first, that the hormones in cheese were actually causing a lot of problems, especially with men. It slowed their sperm rate and their sperm count. It changed the morphology of the sperm. It also increased prostate cancer. Okay, through these studies, they found that men who ate dairy consuming men, they had a 30 to 60% higher chance of contacting prostate cancer than the non-dairy consuming men. This is also deliberate. In women now, because of the hormones that are found in the cheese, if they've been previously diagnosed with cancer, breast cancer especially, they had a 49% likelihood of dying if they consumed one or more dairy products per day, which is whole milk, cheese, or butter. So, you know, it's something we don't want to play around with our health. Let's just get away from those cravings and think before we eat. So diabetes is also linked to the increased fat. A lot of times diabetics choose to only blame the high sugar, but it's the fat that gets into the cells of the muscles and the liver. Therefore, the sugar can't get out of your bloodstream and go into those muscle cells. So it builds up into your blood, and then you have diabetes. So again, we as vegetarians, we may get rid of the meat, we get rid of everything else, but we still hang on to cheese. So do we have choices to make? I would say yes. Cheese also has addictive properties. Of course, the high salt and the high fat. This combination alone tends to get us hooked, but there's this protein called casein. And as it's concentrated in cheese, it is called casomorphine, which is a casein-derived morphine-like compound. It's actually like giving yourself a very mild dose of morphine. And that, again, is to create addiction, because morphine is addictive. So if your cheese has morphine in it, no wonder it's hard to give up. They say it's the hardest thing. When somebody wants to go from a vegetarian or a meat diet to a vegetarian diet and vegetarian to plant-based, they have a very hard time. Cheese is a hard thing, and it's by design. But I don't want to leave you there. I don't have time to cover everything about cheese, but there is good news. There are healthier cheese alternatives made from almond-based, cashew, and tapioca-based. And as they're going on from year to year, they're finding more and more cheeses. I took a picture of some of the cheese products that I had in my fridge, but I didn't post it here. But if you go to the grocery section, you'll see it yourself. Therefore, with using these healthy cheese alternatives, there's no milk in it, no hormones, no cholesterol, no heart disease, no diabetes, no arthritis, no cancer risk. So I'm just going to show you a few pictures again because we're moving on in time. These are all made from plant-based. Don't they look good? They look delicious. We can learn to make that. We can make the changes ourselves. Lasagna. Those are pictures of vegan plant-based lasagnas. So we don't have an excuse. We don't have an excuse. Here are some recipes. I'm not going to go through the recipes, but you can use cashews, and they show you how to break it down and how to make vegan cream cheese with cashews. You can make vegan mozzarella. So I just want to stop by and say this morning, I used to love cheese. I used to love dairy, and I had to give it up. There's so many things more I could say about cheese, how it's contaminated with even the feces from the animals when they're being milked. Like there's so many things I could add to this, but let's get off these things that are harmful for our bodies. Because really, we as Seventh-day Adventists, especially, we have the health message. We've had so much counsel from the past. So let's take it, regardless of how our craving for it. It takes 21 days to make a new habit. So let's get off cheese if we can. By the grace of God, let's repeat this. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So when it comes to that question of pass the cheese, no, no, thank you. I'll pass. Thank you and God bless you.